Welcome to this presentation about point, line, and plane. Most effective visual designs contain a variety of different kinds of visual elements, including planar elements, large areas of design including photographs, bodies of text, linear elements that join elements together and create relationships, and point elements, or very small design elements that create focal points of interest. Up to this point, we've been working with large, medium, and small elements that are essentially planar elements, and today we're going to begin the process of adding points and lines to our design vocabulary. So what is a point? Simply speaking, points are small design elements, usually less than 1/8 of an inch. They can often be circular, sometimes they're just a single character, sometimes literally just a spot on a design. But their most important design function is to serve as a focal point for our audience to draw our attention to a specific part of the design. They activate or add interest to areas of white or negative space and keep the design sort of unified and flowing. For our purposes, points can be the simple 1/8 inch square on the grid that we've used in problems 3 and 4, and we'll continue now to exploit. So what's a line element? Well, simply stated, a line element can be either implied or explicit, and that means it can either be just simply lining things up on the grid to create a line of across a gutter or a line between visual elements, but they can also be explicitly drawn, and lines are usually measured in thickness by a system of measurement called points. And a point is 1/72 of an inch. So a 9-point line would be 1/8 of an inch, and that's a pretty thick line on most designs. A lot of designs are even smaller, contain lines that are even smaller than 1 point. A hairline, for example, is 1/4 of a point, or about 1/300th of an inch thick. But a 1-point line is probably a good place to start. 1, 2, 3 points. Thicker than that, and the line will really start to feel heavy in our design. So it can be any of those thicknesses, but let's try to work with smaller lines as we begin. So lines are used to establish relationships and connect related elements on our design, again, either implicitly by lining things up or explicitly by drawing a line between objects on our design. So how do we make lines in Photoshop? Well, first we begin by finding the line tool, and it's under the shape menu. By default, the shape menu begins or has as its first tool the rectangle, and so if you don't know where the line tool is, it's kind of hard to find it first. So we have to find it first. Then we select the color and thickness on the toolbar, and depending on how your elements is set up, it may not be black, and it needs to be for this exercise. So we'll select black as the color and then select the point value, 1 being 1/72 of an inch and moving up in the toolbar so that we select the color and thickness of our line. Then it's very simple. You locate your cursor on your design where you want the line to start, and then simply drag to the endpoint. As you do that, Photoshop Elements will automatically create a new layer in the layer stack that will contain only that line. Hold the Shift key while you're dragging to create a vertical or horizontal line quickly. The Shift key is called the constrain key, and this is just a powerful little trick to make sure your lines are perfectly flat or perfectly vertical very quickly, so you don't have to be all that careful with them and just concentrate on the beginning and the end. So hold the Shift key down, let go of the mouse, and then let go of the Shift key, and you'll have a perfectly flat or perfectly vertical line each time. After you've drawn your line and have your new layer created, you just simply reposition the layer by using the Move tool, clicking on the line and dragging it where you want it to go. Duplicate and delete the layers as you see fit. Probably you'll find it just as fast to draw a line as to duplicate the layer, but that's an option for you as well. You edit a line by simply clicking on one of the endpoints of the line, the beginning or the end, and dragging that endpoint to a new location. If you drag just one end of a straight line, you'll end up getting a diagonal line, and as we'll see later, you want to be just a little careful with diagonal lines. So let's switch over to Photoshop and see how we actually can draw a line on our template. So here I'm at my desktop, and you notice that I have the template 4 grid PSD file, and I'll just launch Photoshop Elements by double-clicking on that. And here we are with our grid 4 with our 4 design elements ready to go. Let's get started by finding the line tool. I've used the line tool most recently, so you can see it here, but you might see it the rectangle as your shape. So this is called the shape menu, and by default the rectangle is the first shape you see. So to find the line tool, it's going to be under the rectangle tool. Just drag down and there it is. Again, by default your default colors are black in the foreground and white as the background. If you want to very quickly go back to that, let's say you for example had red as your color. If you want to quickly go back to black, you just click on this little tool and it sets the default foreground and background colors. And there we are. So now to draw a line, all I have to do is position my cursor where I want the line to begin, click and drag. And I'm going to deliberately draw kind of a wild diagonal line here like this. If I want that to snap into a horizontal, I just hold the Shift key down, it snaps, let go of my mouse, and I have a perfectly flat line. Now that line was drawn as a 3-pixel line up in my toolbar. Let me hit the undo and let's try that again, but first I'll specify black as my color and a 1-pixel line as my thickness. Same trick, and again I'll hold the Shift key down, keeps it perfectly flat, no choice, draw it any place I want to go. And of course I don't have to draw all the way across, I can make kind of a little line segment, whatever length you want, and then let go first of the mouse and then of the Shift key. Now it seems like nothing's happened, but what's happened is that the line is so fine it just is completely sort of swallowed up by my grid. So what I want to do is go down and turn off my grid. And in this exercise you'll find it very convenient to toggle turning on and off the grid as you need. So I'm going to turn it off for now and I can see my line. You'll also find it handy to use your keyboard shortcuts, and there's a couple that we want to make sure we're familiar with. Control plus zooms in, and I've zoomed past my line. So here's another very important keyboard shortcut. If I hold down the spacebar key, no matter what tool I'm using, it'll temporarily suspend that tool and turn my tool into the hand or move tool. So I'm going to move that, the grab tool, and I can find my line. I can zoom in again, Control plus, hand, Control plus, and you can start seeing the line up close. Now to zoom out, Control minus, and there's my design. You can sort of see it'll change its thickness depending on my view. The actual line won't change, but it'll appear to be thicker or thinner. Let's turn the grid back on, and let's make another line. And again, I could duplicate this line, but I think that's actually more steps than drawing a new one. Let's do it. Click, drag on to my new layer icon, and I've got the exact same line. Now I have to position my move tool, the arrow, on top of that line and drag it. I think just drawing a new line is just about as fast. Here, let's delete that layer and try it. Click, drag with the Shift key down. I think that's faster, but you're welcome to explore any way you want. Now a horizontal line will do, a vertical line will do the same way. Start in one direction vertically, hold the Shift key down, and it'll lock it into a perfect vertical. Now to edit this line, all I need to do is click on it, and I'll see the handles on the end, and I can stretch the line out, shrink it down, and I can, if I choose, rotate. When I'm done with a move, it'll ask me if I want to confirm that. If I want to rotate the line, being very careful, I can do that as well. I'm going to say no, don't confirm that one. So I can stretch it or shrink it or rotate it just by clicking on one of the endpoints. If I want to turn it into a rectangle, I can click and drag, kind of like a window shade, but that's generally not a great idea either, so I'll say no on that. To reposition it, just move the arrow till it's right on the line and put it where you want it to go. Well, we've seen some basics of working with point, line, and plane, and now you might be wondering if you can extend your skills and get just a little bit more creative or a little fancier with these various visual design elements. And I'd like to give you a few tips today, but I'd like to begin by sort of just warning you that you want to be careful to avoid the look of a gimmicky kind of design. And remember that less is more. If you find something that works, try to avoid the temptation to throw the kitchen sink at the design and have too much going on so there's really no organization. It's pretty easy to create a distracting design that doesn't work well because you have so much going on that it's distracting. So consider more complex shapes where you can take one of the squares and add it to another and create a rectangle, or a T or an L. Um, Consider reversals, which are white on black squares that give the appearance of cutouts. Sometimes, in fact, they're called cutouts. More correctly, a reversal. So a white line on a black square, or a white square on a black square, can be quite interesting and create a focal point on your design. Consider, but carefully consider, diagonals or obliques. Um, Rotating squares to make them diagonal, or adding a diagonal element, are very, very powerful kind of visual design tricks. But there's kind of two reasons to avoid them. First, they tend to sort of obliterate the possibility of creating good relationships that the grid has created for us. Sometimes you'll see entire designs kind of rotated a little bit, and that rotates the grid with them as well. And that can be kind of effective. But just a mere diagonal kind of placed on a regular horizontal and vertical grid is generally pretty distracting. The second reason to avoid diagonals is just a pragmatic one. They tend to bring on what's called the jaggies, or jagged edges, more correctly called pixelization, where you can actually see the individual pixels or building blocks of the design, and that can be really annoying. The edges of the design start to look like little miniature staircases. And Elements is particularly prone to creating the jaggies in a diagonal line, layout, especially diagonal line. So you want to be a little careful. I think at this point I would recommend that you avoid diagonals, but we do want to include that as a possibility. So let's switch back to Elements and take a look at how we might create both complex shapes and reversals and diagonals. So here we are back on our design, and let's create a couple of more shapes just to begin to work with. Let's create another large shape and move it over here, about there, let's say. And let's move our other large shape there, and let's take this guy and move it to here. And I'm not being all that careful with my elements at this point, but I'll kind of, and I think I need another one of these guys, and and let's put that one down here, maybe right about there. And then let's do one more medium-sized element, and just to kind of keep something going here, let's do that. Okay, and I think just for now I'm going to hide my line. Okay, now if I wanted to create a reversal, what I'm going to do is create a white square on a black square. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take a black square, I'll create a new one, and then I'm going to use my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to use my paint bucket tool to color the copy. Now right now the foreground color is set to black, and if I color a black square black, it'll stay black. So if I use this little arrow tool, it'll toggle the foreground and background. So I'll have a white foreground and a black background. And by the way, for future reference, not for this problem, but if I wanted, for example, a red square, I could do that and then hit my paint bucket and I'd have a red square. We're not going to do that today. We're going to use white. So I want to go default and switch it. White, sorry. And use my paint bucket. So there I've got a white square. It's difficult to see because it's completely covered up the original, but I can see it's there by the absence of the grid. So I'll use the move tool, and now to create this this reversal, I'll just drag it over and put it, let's put it down here. Okay. Now if I wanted to create a complex shape where two shapes overlay, I might say, let's take one of these unit squares and drag it down and do something like this. Maybe something like that. I'll move my white square over just one nudge so it doesn't interfere. And then I might take this square, again I'm just kind of playing around here, and make it white and move it into here, something like that. and build this sort of theme of white square in the corner of a black square kind of a thing working, and keep playing with that. What if I wanted to create a reversal with a linear element? Let's start by creating a 3-pixel line from the edge of this block through this block. And I'll try to line up to the edge of this element right here. Now that's a white line. I can't see the white over there and I can't see the white over there. What's going on? Well, if you look over at the layer menu, you'll notice that my shape 1 and my shape 1 copy are way at the bottom of my layer stack. So they're underneath these other elements. So what I want to start doing is move them to the top. I'm going to click and drag in my order. Just drag that layer all the way to the top. And that will make the white line visible on top of my black. You may have encountered this problem where you've got a layer hidden underneath some things. Well, that's great over here. I see my reversals working great. I've got white on black, but what's going on out here? I've got no black line showing up here. Well, let's just go draw another one right on top of that one, in fact, or we could just duplicate this. Let's do that. Duplicate this one, and now I'm going to color it black using my paint bucket tool, but I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so I can see it, and I'm going to color it. Now it covers up my white line exactly. So I'm going to use my move tool and just drag this end, and it'll magically reveal the edge of that line. And I think I'm off by like 1 pixel, but let's fix that in a second with something different. Okay, so you can see I am off maybe by a pixel, and the way I'm going to handle that is just with my move tool and my arrow and just nudge it over. And I think it's kind of split the difference. I think I liked it better the other way, so I'll nudge it back. And let's zoom out. And now I've got a reversal, a white slice, and a black line, and that's building on my theme. Let's try that one more time with a vertical line, and let's do the vertical line over here, and I'll start 1 square above and maybe over here. Draw this time all the way through, hold the shift key down, and I'll stop at the top of this line right here, and that's a black line, but again way at the bottom. So if I want it to show up at all, I'm going to have to drag it up my stack. Now it's up to the top and it's visible, and I'll have to do the same thing. I'll make a duplicate of it and colorize it in white this time, and then shrink that line down the other way, and I've got my reversal working. Now of course you could have drawn 2 lines and had them butt up against each other with the correct colors. I just find it easier to get them exactly correct by having it duplicates of the lines. And now you might see, oh gosh, wouldn't it be nice if I had some other little reversal of an element to build on this theme, the white square and the black corner thing. So maybe I'm going to take this little guy and duplicate that layer, and again zoom in because it's so small, and move it over, and maybe I'll put this one right down there. Same problem all over again. Black square on a black square. Let's take the paint bucket and zap it, and it's okay in the stacking order so I can see it, but I think I need to nudge it over maybe 1 pixel, and I think that that's about right. So let's zoom out and see what that looks like. So I'm beginning to work on a couple of thematic elements here. I've got the white square in the black corner, that's kind of working, and I've got this reversal, and I've got these implied relationships going. Not sure if it's working quite yet. I think I might need to activate the white areas down here, and maybe these corners that are kind of dead might need something, maybe a black square over here and something else in here. But I'm kind of getting there. Now, what I want to do is stop and ask myself along the way questions like hierarchy. What's the most important design element here? And I'm not sure I've got that resolved yet. I think there's some competition down here because of the stark white. My eye wants to go here and see what that's all about. But the lines over here are creating the sort of competition here. So I might want to resolve that somehow. Maybe the resolution to that is to make this more important by another, like a duplicate of this area, this thing here, duplicate that, pull it over there, create that kind of a thing. That starts to work on it, but maybe not quite. Keep working a little bit. And as I look out here, I have lots of white space, which is good, but the white space is a little dead, so I might want to take an element like this guy and bring it down and start thinking that maybe something down in here might work pretty well, or something off here might start to work, or even down here. And then if I do something like that, then a nice point element, this guy. You see how few point elements I have in this design? I think there's a tendency amongst a lot of people to overuse them. The kind of point of the point element is that sometimes you get more attention with a whisper than you do a scream. Sorry, I needed to duplicate that first. Let's do that. So if you overuse the point element, you're bouncing people's attention all over the place. So what I'm going to try to do is just create this point of interest, maybe there, or I don't want to lead people off my design by putting it down too far in this corner, but let's try to see how that's working. And then maybe based on that I need something up here as well. So you can kind of see that as you start making decisions, one move like on a chessboard starts to suggest other plays as well. To build on this theme, I might take one more white square and put it up here a little bit. I might even do something a little wilder on my theme, and say, if I'm thinking about do it again, do it different, I might take this guy and put it right in the corner of this one, so that it chops off the black, and like it's kind of, this guy got bitten out of this one, and then that kind of starts to say, that looks pretty interesting up there. Again, remember to turn off the grid if it starts to like do things and trick you, because I don't want that corner to show up at all. So I'm going to zoom in and just make sure that that's not showing up at any level of magnification. I also want to zoom in often as I get to be a little bit more freehand with my designs as we progress during the rest of the semester, and make sure that I don't have any sort of misalignment problems, and I do. Like right here, I got 1 pixel off. This is up too high and it's over too far. Of course, easy to fix. I'm going to move it down, just nudge it with my arrows, and then this guy has to get moved too. So it's kind of fighting the battle, making sure that this distance is about the same as this distance, and that looks about right to me. Maybe this should go up, and that means this goes up and this goes up, but just trying to keep everything exactly aligned. You might think that that's obsessive, and gosh, it kind of is, but the whole point is you'll see these 1 pixel, 1/72 of an inch, 1 point can make a big difference down the road. So you might want to just take a few minutes and play with it and get it just perfect. As I've seen a few problems in designs of student work this semester, I kind of noticed that you have just a little teeny bit off, and it does show up. So be a little bit fanatical with your precision on stuff, and I think you'll be happier with how things end up kind of hanging together. So that's kind of getting there. I'm not sure I like what's kind of happening up here yet, and I'm not sure I've got the hierarchy resolved, but at least I'm doing some stuff, and I might say that kind of pulls together, and then maybe that says I need something over here, like another one of these doodads can kind of come over here for me, maybe something like that. You see how powerful lines are, though, and how quickly they start splitting up your space. And that's why diagonals are really good things to try to avoid, unless there's a really good reason to. Just one more little thing that I might try to do while we're still finishing up here is take one of these little point elements, and one more little point element might make this space right here even more interesting. And that starts to clean up my hierarchy problem a little bit. That starts to say that's really the happening spot. But I'm pretty happy with how this is starting to work out. Kind of a notion to keep in mind as you're looking at the gestalt or overall of the design is to sort of approach this as the captain of a ship might be navigating in a system of islands. Is there a chart or a pathway that you could take to see all of the islands, and is there some sort of a logical progression of your navigation? So is there some way that the boat will get around? Where do I start? That's going to be my hierarchy. Maybe down here someplace, and this is kind of a little weekend trip. Now from here I might want to kind of get over to here and see how these work out, but sooner or later I want to get back up into the design, and so I want to make sure I'm not using these barriers like break reefs, breakwaters to cut off my ship from getting around my islands. So keeping lots of flow and white space so that I can navigate around, but thinking about having the hierarchy resolved so that I'm taking the boat in a very deliberate course down through the island and seeing all of the points of interest. So start thinking about things like themes, but always keep in mind hierarchy and good use of white space to make sure that there are lots of areas that you can activate. If you have too much stuff, too many big areas, then it's pretty difficult to make the rest of the design all that interesting. So good luck with point, line, and plane. Remember, variety is the spice of life, and use your point elements to draw attention, but don't get too far overboard with them. Good luck.